Hey, it's Mr. Garten here with instructions on how to complete part one of the textual evidence writing. So the first thing that you're going to do is insert your short story title here. So I'm using the open window by Saki that we went over in class, but you're going to put your own title in here from one of the other three short stories. Now you're going to want to have a few other things open to refer to. The first is your short story collection that you marked up with annotations and jots the other day. And then the second will be I've got the Prezi up here, but you're going to want your notes that you took the other day as well. You're going to use those to fill out this box. So in this box, we have the broad literary element that's present in our short story. You have to choose somewhere between 3 and 5 of these. There are a few listed, so characterization, conflict, figurative language, and irony. And there are 2 other spots in case there's something else that you want to include. You're going to need to first identify which of the types of characterization or conflict or figurative language or whatever it is apply to this particular story. So we've got, as far as characterization goes in the open window, we've got direct characterization. There's all kinds of conflict, but character versus self is one of them. And then we have actually all 3 kinds of irony, but I'm going to explore dramatic irony in this one. And remember, we only need 3 to 5. So then we can move on to the definitions, and you can pull these straight from the Prezi or straight from your notes. So direct characterization is when the author simply tells us what the character is like. The character versus self conflict or internal conflict is a struggle occurring entirely within a character's mind. And then dramatic irony is that discrepancy between the expected results and the actual results. And then this is probably going to be the most time consuming part, is finding the examples. So you're going to have to go back into your model and find examples of each of these. So the first one that we're looking for is characterization. So where is a character directly characterized? And we have it actually right here in the second paragraph. So I'm going to take this section right here, and I will copy it and paste it in here. So what I'm selecting is where it says, privately, he doubted more than ever whether these formal visits on a succession of total strangers would do much towards helping the nerve cure which he was supposed to be undergoing. And then notice I included the page number here. Make sure that when you include a page number, that it's in parentheses and that there is a period directly after it at the end of the sentence. You also, if you're taking a direct quote, you want to have quotation marks at the very beginning of the quote and quotation marks at the very end of the quote, but you don't want to have a period inside. Or a comma or any punctuation unless it's an exclamation mark or a question mark. There should be a period after the MLA citation. And then we need to explain briefly how this evidence supports the definition. So I can just say something like, although part of Frampton's nervous behavior can be inferred, which would be indirect characterization, the author goes on to state outright that the protagonist is seeking a cure for his nerves. And then we're done with that section. We can go on to conflict. So conflict, I need to find an example of character versus self or internal conflict. And we actually get that when Mrs. Sappleton says that she expects her family to come in from hunting soon. Now notice here, I did not take a direct quote. I just summarized. And that's completely fine. It does not have to be a direct quote as long as you're summarizing exactly what happens in the story. You still, though, need this page number as an MLA citation, and you need to have the period at the end. So Mrs. Sappleton says this on page 3. So if I go down to page 3, I can show you. It's right here where she says her husband and brothers will be home directly from shooting. So I could copy this entire quote from her, but I can say just as much just by summarizing it in those few words. And then I'm going to explain briefly. So as Mrs. Sappleton is saying this, Frampton is struggling internally with the uncomfortable situation of being the guest of someone who he thinks is crazy. And then let's go on to our final one, irony. So when we get to that last section of the story, and the niece says, I expect it was the spaniel. He told me he had a horror of dogs. And then we know that the niece has lied to Frampton about the tragedy. And this is dramatic irony. Also notice that when I used my introductory phrase, I mentioned that it was on page 4, so I don't have to put that number 4 in parentheses at the end of my direct evidence. What I do need to do is explain it. So I'm explaining that the audience, just like the protagonist, has been led to believe one thing. However, the opposite is true, which is what makes it dramatic irony. Mrs. Sappleton's completely sane, the family is still alive, and this leads Frampton to believe that he is the crazy one. So now I have my chart completely filled out. I just went through 3 of them, but I did choose the specific type of the literary element. I put the definition in, I provided an example, and I briefly explained why that example supports the definition. Now go try it on your own with the short story that you read.